Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions 7 days a week. Alexander, let's dive right in.
First one this morning is coming from Robert Shoji in Los Angeles. For cameras that do not have a dual native ISO, are there any disadvantages to shooting at a low ISO, i.e. below 200?
Go ahead, Jason.
No, that's precisely what you should be doing. If you don't have a dual native ISO, almost every camera is going to want to be set for its single native ISO, which is somewhere between 100 and 200.
Bill?
Yeah, on the Blackmagic cameras I use and almost everything else I use, 200 is kind of the floor. Now, dual native also has one at the high end that has less processing. They built the circuits to do that because you get up to high ISOs, you get all sorts of grain and noise that you don't want. The traditional way that cinematographers handle a lot of bright light is not lowering the ISO, but using a neutral density filter. And in fact, the old traditional shoulder mount cameras had a little dial-in neutral density filters, and some of the really more professional cameras still have not ISO, but those filters that literally put a color-balanced 2, 4, 6 stop filter between your lens and the sensor, and that's really the proper way to get into high brightness situations and get a reasonable exposure.
Courtney?
Well, you have to give up if you don't have a higher ISO. You may have to give up shooting high speed, above 60 frames per second indoors where you don't have a lot of light, because you just can't gather enough light in the short period of time that the sensor is sampled on those higher frame rates at a low ISO. So that, and it has to do also with the amount of at the lower ISOs, the shutter will have to stay open longer. You'll have to have a bigger shutter angle to gather light, and then that you're going to get a lot more motion blur, which could be a good thing, or it could be a bad thing if you're trying to shoot stuff that you're going to slow-mo down later.
Alex?
The base ISO, or a native ISO, is what all the color science is based on. So as you vary from it, you're going to start varying from that color science. And so you're going to see changes in color. You're going to see changes in grain. You're going to see lower dynamic range. You're going to see a bunch of things as you go below that. You're really better off not going very much or at all below your native ISO. The native ISO is where you want to go to. You don't want to go much below that. As you'll start to see colors change, and you're not going to get that much more quality out of it. That's the native ISO. So going lower is not the way it would work in film. Digital is a different beast.
Bill?
And don't forget, there's always a relationship between your depth of field and your aperture. So if you've got very little light hitting your lens already, be careful, because as you open up that aperture, your depth of field gets more and more shallow, and you can find yourself with a razor-thin depth of field, which is a real annoying thing when you're trying to do anything other than a fixed shot. It's okay to have the tip of the nose in focus, but not the eyes. That's not a pleasant thing to work with.
Next question.
This one's from Omar Gadan in Orange County, California. What is the best way to get 16 channels of on-site audio into AWS and then mixed by a remote operator? Vmix's Engine, NDI, and or LiveUs are options.
Go ahead, David.
Well, I'm going to defer to Jonas for the actual technical details, but back in May of 2024, the NHL did a production that was a case study on Amazon. That's kind of their flowchart for how it all worked. I'll put a link to the actual article in the chat. It's pretty in-depth, and I'll pass it to Jonas at this point.
Go ahead, Jonas.
You're going to have multiple problems that we're going to need to talk about. The first one is, how do you get those up to the cloud? There's multiple options there. If you have a LiveU or an encoder, you can use multiple audio channels with that. Vmix is now compatible finally, where they can also use multiple tracks. In the past, they could only do one track with up to 8 channels. Now you can use 4 tracks with 2 channels each, so you would need to send 2 SRTs in to get that. We use something like Nimble to pick out the specific PIDs of the different streams. Alternatively, and a little more budget friendly, is you could use NDI Bridge. You could pull in free audio. So there's a free audio tool now. use that. That allows you to create multi-channel audio. And then that source you can once again bring back into Vmix. That being said, to control it, there's two things that you need to be aware of. One is, how does the person control it? And two, how does the person hear it? If you use Vmix, one thing to keep in mind is that you don't have API or programmatically access to all of the functions of the audio mixer. So like the EQ and all the plugins, you don't have access to. So what we mostly do is we make sure that the A1 actually has access to that through nice CCV, Splashtop, or something like that. And then we also use the low latency WebRTC feed to get a really high quality version of the audio down. Make sure that your A1 is able to solo and that it's a separate multi-view from the production. We didn't do that for one production, and then the A1 presses solo on their cue and everybody freaks out because everybody just get muted except for that one problematic mic. If you're using Vmix for the engine, something like a central control is great to get actual faders to talk to it. With other solutions, you probably need to use remote MIDI. I've not found that to be super easy to set up. That being said, there's also more audio solutions now. Cloud MX from Waves is pricey, but really cool. Llama Mix, OnHertz are all options that you can use in the cloud then to control it. One other solution is Unity Intercom is also one that we have seen used. It's really annoying though because it's only Mac based. That being said, there is Audio Movers has a way to also move a lot of channels. You could cook up something with GStreamer and send it over SRT that way as well.
Next question.
Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. The Cinemon app turns your iPad into a camera monitor with the use of a hardware mount. The app takes the incoming video signal and displays it on the screen with pro monitoring tools. Thoughts?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, without being able to download the app and play with it, I don't have a lot of strong opinions yet, but I think that it is a little bit of a holy grail of having an iPad be able to get a good video signal, a solid video signal that it can interrogate, like being able to look at stuff and understand it. The problem really is what kind of compression goes through it to get it into the iPad and whether that's going to make it not as accurate. Using it as a straight monitor is a very expensive way to use an iPad. So if you have an iPad laying around, that's fine, but you're not going to usually, I mean, I think that people think that they would use that iPad as a monitor and they wouldn't. Where it makes a difference is now you have a piece of software that you can do lots of other things like guides, again, monitoring data, scopes, all kinds of other things that can be added to the iPad. The problem is scopes and many of those things don't make as much sense when you're compressing it. so it's hard when you're not getting the baseband directly into the monitor. But those are the kind of things. A lot of times we're kind of limited in field monitors to having, whatever the FPGA can pull off or whatever the manufacturer decided to do, having an open piece of software that lets you constantly change what those things are. There's lots of things I would love to have in a monitor that this could potentially provide for if it has the tools. So it'll be interesting to see. I'll probably download it when it becomes more available. I looked for it to see if I could find it, but I don't know exactly where to get. I know it's on an open beta, but I don't know where that is.
Bill?
It looked like one of those Kickstarter things, and it might be a really good idea, and it might not be. It's hard to say. I did do a quick search on just the App Store for video monitor scopes, and I found multiple programs that do similar types of things, add more detail off of an iPad or an iPhone about a video signal coming in, but I agree with Alex 100%. If you're going to be looking at technical quality of a signal, you want absolute accuracy, and you want the delivery process to be something is not adding anything into your signal. So maybe Kickstarters are funny. Sometimes they're great and they really do change the whole game, and sometimes they're just fizzle away and it never happens. So hard to say what this one's going to do.
Courtney?
Well, if you have an old iPad or an iPad mini, it's a good way to press it back into service again. I think I looked at some of it. The problem is you got to use a bunch of dongles and then you're getting it back down to webcam quality connection, because you got to go through a dongle that converts HDMI to USB, and then from USB-A to USB-C, so second dongle. And, so you're dealing with that, and you have scopes and everything on it, but, the question is you're dealing with the color science that's built into that USB, that HDMI to USB converter. And so that's where that conversion's happening and compression's happening, Alex was saying. So, yes, I wouldn't use it for judging the quality of the signal, but for, doing like focus assist or, I wouldn't trust necessarily the scopes on it as far as accuracy of the color. But for other options, framing, things like that, it could be a way to use an older iPad. Otherwise, there are a lot cheaper monitors you can get that have all those scopes built in and take a unfiltered USB 2.0, HDMI 2.0 signal in directly.
Jonas?
For a long time, the Blackmagic Video Assist was my main carry on productions for all monitoring and all that. And I have to admit, the iPad is starting to rival it. Because what you can do with the iPad now and tools like that is really great. That being said, looking at the solution, I think they are squarely where I think they should be. They realize that they are great for like overlays, some sidebars, a little bit of like getting you a rough idea. Am I too blue? Am I too gray? Like, where am I? I wouldn't use them for technical things, but like for a quick look, or like desqueezing, like you can desqueeze a thing. I think it's really useful for that. But the thing to keep in mind is if you then have an iPad that you carry around with it, now you have your patch list on that. Now there's really cool tools. If you plug a Ethernet plugin, now you can use it as an interrogator for the network. You can ping, you can check the network, all of that. You can do NDI, SRT, all of that. That has proven to be a lot more useful than just the UVC capture. That being said, it's a great tool to have in your tool set. We had a couple jobs where like you're in the server room and the KVM is not working. How are you going to get a display out of that system when you are in a different continent? Well, you have your iPad, you plug it in, and suddenly you can see the image on that. That has saved us a couple times. They demo it with the Camlink 4K, and like Courtney said, it is something to keep in mind, but you wouldn't want your V1 to shade off this, but like to look at something, it's probably good enough for that. And the iPad actually is a pretty nice monitor.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I will say, based off of what everybody has been saying, I'll agree that having an iPad in the field for field monitoring, I think is almost a must these days, only because there's so many eyeballs on iOS devices, and because Apple has this managed color pipeline that they worked on back from the original of OS X coming out. You can be pretty sure that what you see on an iPad is going to be very, very, very close to what everybody in the world who's looking at an iPhone or an iPad is going to see. So in terms of an audience confidence monitor, I always have an iDevice on set just because I want to see what they're going to be seeing. That's important to me.
David?
And just to Jonas's point about the Blackmagic Video Assist, I'm curious, is there an SDI route into this app on the iPad? Because working in an SDI workflow, that's important.
They demo a couple SDI to UVC converters. That being said, they of course show off the $50 ones from Amazon. If you look like Epiphan, I think has a couple. There are a couple that you could use, but keep in mind it's a UVC and not Thunderbolt device, so you couldn't just use like your Blackmagic mini recorder or something like that, sadly. But there are some solutions for that.
And Courtney, wrap us up.
Yeah, and I did look at it. It does say Mac Pro. So can this app run, is it cross-platform between Mac OS and iOS? So that you could use it at a DIT station with a Mac Pro and a tuned monitor to get the unfiltered inputs from your camera over SDI to HDMI or SDI card plugged into the Mac Pro.
Of course, once you do that, you have no Omniscope.
Yeah,
a lot more.
That's true. You do have Omniscope that you can fall back on.
Once you get to the Mac, you're like, well, there is another app.
But I guess that's just an additional feature. You could use it on either one if you want that, run that software.
What really needs to happen is Cinemon needs to hook up with the folks who make Halide and Orion, who already has the iPad app monitor, that if they can... this is a company that's known for getting in there and tweaking and maximizing what the hardware can do, not necessarily what's plain vanilla available. So if they can figure out a way to get that signal in there uncompressed, even if it's only a certain amount of USB-C to HDMI dongles that can do it, that's what you need. Get the uncompressed signal in there. Hey, your questions and votes drive the show, so make sure to use Mechana to chat, ask questions, vote on the questions. If you're not in Mechana, just sign up. officehours.global/join. Next day, you'll get an email. It'll have the links to get into Mechana, Discord, all the good stuff. Next question.
This one's from Douglas Carmichael. OpenAI has announced the Stargate project to massively build data centers for U.S. AI development. Do you think this means we'll see the end of usage and rate limits on services like ChatGPT?
Jonas?
No. They still try to make money. It's not like that the US government is funding any of that. Like, let's be clear. It's a bunch of VC people. It's a bunch of rich people, rich companies dumping money into a project to make more money out of it. They're not doing that out of the kindness of their heart. That being said, we'll probably get more access to larger models. If you look at what OpenAI put out with their Pro tier, they're saying at $200 a month, they're still losing money on that tier because people are using it too much. What we do know is that, for example, DeepSeek, which is a Chinese open source model, are driving prices down. So now you're getting O1 Mini as well in the free tier of ChatGPT.
Courtney?
Yeah, I think actually it's consuming a little bit less energy. But did you notice that the person missing from that conglomerate of companies was Microsoft? And Gates is developing those small nukes, which he still hasn't gotten permission to install yet. But if they are successful, nuclear-powered power supply for these data centers would probably bring the cost down considerably once they get them running efficiently.
Next question.
Pedro G. Gonzalez III, Washington, D.C. Thinking of a Blackmagic 6K Pocket Pro for a video. I've heard several say autofocus is horrible or non-existent. What is your experience?
Go ahead, Jason.
Okay, tap to focus on the back screen is acceptable. I'm using the 6K Pro, and I have a manual focus wheel that I use, and I would love to have Sony's autofocus, but I don't.
Jonas?
I think the single tap to focus is fine. That being said, what's really great about the focus control is that there's an API for it and there's a remote for it, and you can control it from abroad. So like for remote production and kids and things where like you can't reach your camera, it's still totally fine for that because you can pull it remotely.
Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the arguments that Blackmagic has, I think, around this is that if you're doing cinema, like, you don't care about autofocus, right? So autofocus is something that we pay a lot of attention to because, we're using it as webcams or we're just doing run and gun, and you just want it to kind of do what it needs to do. But I think that is the, and it's hard. Doing autofocus is hard. What Blackmagic does is a kind of a high pass filter. So basically it takes the whole image and it does a high pass, and then it changes it until the discontinuity between the blacks and whites goes to zero. And so it's a very old-fashioned, it's like the most basic autofocus. It's like what we did when we first did autofocus is what Blackmagic does for that. So it's like, okay, you want autofocus here, push the button, we'll run this high-pass filter, and we'll adjust until we get to until we close off the black and white edges. And if you want to see what that looks like, take a image in, if you just want to see what that means, take an image in Photoshop and blur it. Take one layer and leave it the same, and then blur it, and then do a high pass filter on each one of those, and you'll see the difference between those two, and you can see what it's looking for when it's trying to make that adjustment. Obviously, the Sony and Canon and many others are much more advanced, and they can do them on the fly. And so if you're looking for autofocus, if you just need to tap the button and have it work, it's fine. If you are going to do it the way a filmmaker would do it, which is that you're going to manually control it and have measurements or have a good monitor that you can see, then it doesn't matter. But if you're really looking for actual live autofocus, which is what I need for this web camera, then you need to get something else. And most people have leaned into the Sonys for that because they have the best autofocus right now.
Quick shout out to 2 new evening shows that we've got here at Office Hours for you to watch live or later. We've got Extra Hours on Mondays at 6 with Grant Whitehead, and then The Rundown, which is Thursday nights at 6 with David Paskin at 6 Pacific, 9 Eastern. Check them out. Next question.
This one's from me. I'm using Vicreo Listener with key combination and Companion to trigger keyboard shortcuts inside of Zoom Workplace. So far, only one works and others not. Can't determine why. Thoughts?
Go ahead, David.
Just curious, Alexander. Is it the paid or free version of Vicreo Listener? Because the basic one is finite number of things. The paid version, €50, you get 5 machines you can do it on, and it does all those weird special key combos.
It is the free version, and I did read that, but it's not very clear on the website exactly what things work and what doesn't. But it says multiple keystrokes, more than 2, I think you need the paid version, and I'm using key combinations, which is just 2. So it's weird that one works, but then the other one with the same number of strokes does not work.
It's the special modifier keys, so Control, Alt, Option, etc. Those are kind of limited to the paid version, to the best of my knowledge. I have a paid version; it just renewed, so it's worth the €50. I forget what the exchange rate is.
I should probably just buy that.
And all of the shortcuts are in there as global shortcuts, right? So that it can.
No, haven't turned it on. I haven't turned that on yet.
In Zoom, I would double check that you've got global shortcuts ticked next to the things that you want to control from other applications. Basically, what that's doing is it's taking that command and then allowing other apps to access it using the accessibility protocol on the Mac anyway. And then same thing on the Windows. If global shortcut is checked, then no matter what application you're in, that keyboard shortcut is going to trigger Zoom. Just be careful that you're not having conflicts where keyboard shortcuts from one app are then getting trumped by something else, and then you're confused. Next question.
This one's from Håkan Fors in Stockholm, Sweden. Has anyone tried to use TouchOSC as a custom-designed touch surface for Bitfocus Companion?
Go ahead, David.
Not yet. I've used it in the past with Resolume Arena, and it's kind of cool to build things out that way, but I'll be digging back into it.
And Jonas?
In the past, we have done that. The main issue you find is TouchOSC is really cool because it can do sliders and like your custom interfaces. But like the name says, then communicates with OSC to Companion. I think it also speaks other protocols now, but what I always find the issue with tools like this is that you don't get feedback. So that's always where we run into is I would much rather figure out a way to directly control, let's say Vmix for like audio sliders or something from TouchOSC that has bidirectional communication. So you also have feedback.
Next question.
Paul Vahus in Austin, Texas. Apple TV 4K's tvOS 18.2, a cinematic leap for home theater enthusiasts. What hardware does it support and what does it do?
Jason Bache, what does it do?
What does it do? Wow, some hyperbolistic questioning there. So you get cinematic aspect ratios, 21 by 9, 2.37 by 1, 2.39 by 1, 2.40, DCI 4K, and 32 by 9. What's it supported on? I believe it's only the last 2. So right now the current Apple TV is the 3rd generation 4K. I believe it's the 3rd generation 4K and the 2nd generation 4K. Maybe the 1st, but I'm not positive about that.
So it's not that it's outputting like a letterboxed thing. It's actually doing the whole interfaces in that other resolution?
It's my understanding, yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Alex.
Now that was a great hyperbole of a yawn. Well done.
I just yawned my way right through that release.
That was a great answer.
You need a whole release for this? I guess I would say very incremental.
Like got the Snoopy screensaver.
Snoopy screensaver. I'm not a big Peanuts fan. I feel like it's curb your enthusiasm for kids, which I do not like. So,
next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. Does ATEM have a model that has 2 USB-C ports to allow for sending out program signal to a laptop as well as utilizing the multicorder for each input? Thanks.
Jonas?
Yes, so all of the Extreme models, for example, I have the Extreme ISO here. They have 2 USB ports, so you can use one in a host mode and one in a client mode. So you can route out the get a webcam out. You can even use both for a webcam out. One thing to keep in mind, it will be the same picture in one of the latest updates. The Blackmagic added that you can now route what goes to the webcam, which is awesome, because now I could also show you guys my multi-view or any other thing that is not on program right now. You can do a mix minus, which is really helpful for things like Zoom that wasn't possible in the past, but it's always one output. But yeah, you can totally do that. That being said, ATEM Extreme ISO or ATEM SDI Extreme ISO is what you want when you want multicorder and both USB-Cs.
Yeah, I'll admit when they came out with that feature that allowed you to use the webcam out as something other than program, one of the first things I did was like, okay, I'm making a Stream Deck folder and I'm now going to have outputs. It's like just in case of emergency break glass. If I'm in this weird situation and I need to just get a clean feed of one camera, this is what it's going to be. Super useful to check out the ATEM software update if you haven't done it and you don't have that feature. I just updated my old Mini because I went in there and I was like, where is it? Oh, update time. Next question.
Another one from Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. I'd like to beef up my home network security. Is there a hardware or software for a good type of firewall that what does the panel recommend?
Go ahead, Alex.
I mean, I have a Dream Machine, so I got the Dream Machine Pro. I don't know if it's the best one or not, but I will say that and I'm not trying to run Dante over my network or do anything production right now in this current one. But I will say that I love it. I just have suddenly a lot of visibility. I'm in it all the time. Like, oh, I got to fix this. I got to move this thing around. I have so much data around my wireless network, around my modem, around all the different bits and pieces that I'm pretty sold on it right now.
Go ahead, David.
I've got an old surplus Raspberry Pi that I turned into a Pi hole, and that's pretty good for keeping ads at bay. The other one that I used to run was a pfSense, has a small firewall gateway kind of device. It's, edge kind of protection.
And Mickey in the chat popped in and recommended either Netgate or Cisco as hardware appliances. Another thing that is worth looking into if you're not putting hardware in, but just similar to David's suggestion with the Pi hole, is to run your own DNS or subscribe to a service like NextDNS, so that if it belongs to an ad network, if it's from specific regions of the world, if it's not something that you explicitly allow, then the host name will just not resolve. So when you try to go to a website, for instance, if you do a Google search in my house and the sponsored links come up, you can't click on them. They don't go anywhere.
And as a New Yorker, saying "shut your pie hole" is kind of fun too.
Shut your pie hole. Next question.
This one's from the QR code Kent in Madison, Ohio. Right now I have a cam link with my Sony 6100 going into Vmix. Is there a better setup for my Sony 6100, or should I be looking for another camera?
Jonas.
We have had issues. We had reports of issues with the cam link with overheating. That being said, if you're happy right now, I think it's probably a really good idea. Keep in mind it's USB 3. Since your camera is HDMI based, I would say that's probably a really good solution when you're ready to upgrade to more cameras or you also need additional inputs. I think an ATEM Mini might make sense. Keep in mind that the UVC colors might be different. That being said, in Vmix you can fix all that, so that wouldn't apply to there. But otherwise you can buy other recorders. For example, if you want something that shows up as a DeckLink device, there's the mini recorder that has HDMI and SCI. If I had to depend on it, I would use that. But if you're happy and it's works, I wouldn't spend any more money on it.
Alexander?
I agree with the cautions about the cam link. So it really depends on what if you are happy with that image. I don't know what kind of lens you have. The first thing I always look at is the lens. The 6100s, it's an older mirrorless camera, but it's still quite a good camera. So I would check and see what kind of lens you have. Maybe if you can come back and share with us what you're actually using, and also let us know what exactly you're using it for. If it's just for going into Zoom meetings, that's still a pretty good camera. And if you're not happy with the lens, you can always put more money into that lens, and you'd be surprised at just how much better a picture you can get just by changing the lens on the camera.
Alex?
We find that it's about 45 to 60 minutes, somewhere in that range, where we see the cam links start to have overheating, and the symptom is that they just turn off. Like they just stop sending video. This is the first generation. Second generation didn't seem to have the same problems with it. So the cam link, I think it's the cam link 2 or whatever. So there's a second generation out there. If you have the first generation, you should be careful of that. John Wallace says to just not set it to 4K, which may work. I don't think we had it set to 4K either, but we've definitely had a couple of our events spiked because someone used the cam link. So we don't use them in production.
Yeah, the other frustrating bit is if you decide that you're going to deal with overheating by, I'm just going to get 2 cam links because I already have one and I don't want to spend, big money. They're inconsistent, it seems, batch to batch in terms of the color. So you'll get the color all tweaked right on one cam link, and then you go to the next one, and then things aren't working the same. That's been my experience, and I've heard 1 or 2 other examples of that anecdotally. So you've been cautioned. Hey, did you know you can ask questions 24/7 at askofficehours.global? We also have got this QR code, or again, askofficehours.global. It's quick and easy, nothing to sign up for, nothing to log into. Just askofficehours.global, put in your name, put in your question. We'll work it in over the next few shows. Next question.
Robert Green in Los Angeles. Any cool NAMM Show announcements?
Ooh, Alexander.
There were a few that came across my Instagram feed. There, I'm sure, are a lot more that I'm going to be discovering over the next couple of days. So one thing that stood out was an announcement from SSL, Solid State Logic. So continuing in their consumer-based, consumer-focused interface line, they've now released a 1U rack mount SSL 18, which it has the most I/O of all their interfaces. So it looks like a really solid interface. It's got 32-bit, 192 kilohertz. Looks like a pretty good A to D converter inside. You get 8 SSL design analog preamps with the typical 4K console emulation sound that you would get on the smaller interfaces, 10x balanced outputs. The cool thing about the outputs too, and this is more common nowadays, but you get DC coupled outputs. So if you've got synthesizers and you need to send control voltage to them, you can do that. These are really high-end converters, really high-end outputs. The line outputs can send up to plus 24 dBu. So that's really pro grade. And then, of course, 2 high-quality headphone outputs, which can be their own individual Q mixes as well. They have their own dedicated talkback mic in it as well with their compressor on it. And they have a really good mixer package. The software program that I was looking at here, I think they borrowed it from some of their other SSL products. So it has a really cool look to it. If you like the skeuomorphic design, which I do, and I know some people don't like it, but I like the software to look like the hardware that I know, and it's got good metering in it as well. So it looks like a really cool product. Then they also released the Alpha 8. So this is basically just 8 additional mic preamps with ADAT light pipe on the back. So if you need more I/O, you're recording a big drum kit session, you can get one of these and add that to your kit as well. I don't have pricing on these at the moment, but if it's like the rest of the SSL interface family, it's probably going to be pretty affordable. The other thing that stood out to me was this Wolf Audio Pro Patch 128, which is really interesting. They're not the first company to do this. Actually, there was a company based out in Canada here called Flock Audio that made this digitally controlled patch bay. So traditionally in studios, your analog TT Bantam patch bays, they're expensive. You got to buy a lot of cables. The patch points have to be cleaned. This is a digitally controlled patch bay. Some things that stood out to me were, in addition to the analog I/O on the front, which is pretty common, you get DB25 connectors on the back. What's interesting is that it also has Dante and USB-C. So you can remotely control this. And if you are somebody that has a lot of outboard gear, you basically connect all your I/O to this, and you can build patching chain presets because it's done over software. So no more sticking analog patch bay cords into the front of your patch bay. It's all done digitally, which is really cool. So for example, like if you're someone that does mixing and mastering, you could have a mastering workflow preset and a mixing workflow preset that completely reconfigures all of your outboard gear for your mixing sessions. This is a 64 by 64 patch bay. And again, I don't have a price on this. Probably won't be cheap, but if you start adding up the cost of analog cablings, the cost of maintenance, and you can ask anyone that owns Bantam patch bays how annoying it is to have to maintain those things.
Courtney?
One thing that kind of piqued my interest is Kurzweil announced two new synths, the K2088 and K2061 with 88 keys and 61 keys respectively. And I was amazed at how similar it looks to my Kurzweil K2000 that I bought in 1989. And it's actually designed as a throwback synth to that original synth engine, which was really great and still is really great. The vast synthesis engine that was in the K2000s. I've upgraded mine over the years, but this new one now has a better LCD instead of just a black and white, black on gray LCD that the original one had. And of course, the original SCSI port that was in my K2000, I've updated that. I've replaced that with internal SD cards for 16 gigabytes or 32 gigabytes of internal storage. Before it only had about 2 gigabytes SCSI drive that you could put inside of it. So it's kind of a leap up and a leap back to synthesis from the 80s.
I was waiting for Kurzweil to release the Singularity synthesizer. Now, just have everything come together. This is now with AI.
It's so smart, you don't even need a synthesizer.
The arpeggiators are amazing. Go ahead, Bill.
So I get occasional emails from the PR list that I've always been on. I was interested that Mackie has done a new little portable battery-powered mixer that looks like their old small stuff. But it's interesting because they say the batteries last 8 hours now and are hot swappable, which means that for those of us in video who have to go out and do things in the middle of the desert and things like that, if it stands the test of time and works right, supposedly it has clean preamps and an analog section. That might be a fun thing it's one of the kinds of things I would have played with a lot if I was still on the road doing a lot of those kind of desert boondocker videos for people and not having to have cords. And it's a proprietary battery. That was the only sad thing about it is you have to buy the batteries from them. You can't just replace them with drugstore batteries, but an interesting solution.
Next question.
Jonathan Daigle in Washington, D.C. Can any panelists recommend a cloud backup solution for business use? I would back up only a few computers, Mac and Windows. I'm looking at Backblaze and iDrive. Thoughts?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I've been using Carbonite for years, and they have a variety of different plans. They have a personal plan, a business plan, and enterprise plans. They're different prices. They're priced per month. You can pay for them on an annual basis. And I've used that for just backing up in the cloud for security purposes. So I have offsite backup that's automatic. You just deem certain folders on your PC, and you pay per PC to back up. So business and enterprise may have multiple PC licenses, but it just watches those folders and automatically backs them up whenever it detects a change in any of those folders. So I'm just confident that a lot of my important files that I have in my documents folder, et cetera, are backed up. Their basic plans and their personal plans normally don't back up media files because they're just so big. You can the higher rate plans will back up media files for you. So if you have a lot of media files that you want to store in the cloud in an encrypted format, you can get. I think their basic plus plan will back up media files for you. So, and I've been happy with it. I haven't had to use it very much because, hey, I haven't had a hard drive fail and take all my data with it yet.
Jonas?
So one thing that I really like about Backblaze is that they also really put a lot of thought in the recovery aspect. Because what a lot of people don't keep forgetting is hey, it's really great. There's a cheap service. You can upload all your data. Yeah, I mean, there's one time that you have to like upload everything, and then it's only incremental, and it's fine because my download speed is not that fast. And then you get hit by, I don't know, a ransomware or something breaking, and suddenly you need to get all your data back, and you're like, okay, how am I gonna do that? Backblaze has a great idea for that. They're just gonna ship you some hard drives. You can copy it from the hard drives. You can get it back that way. And if you ship them back to Backblaze, you're going to get a refund for the cost of the hard drives. So keep that in mind as you're evaluating your backup solutions. Think about your recovery plan. A lot of people make the issue that they only think about the backup plan, but never about the recovery. Also, a backup plan that doesn't have a recovery plan built in isn't a backup. And a backup that has never been recovered and doesn't have like monthly, probably more often, but monthly is probably fine, recovery tests is not a backup, because then you don't know that the data is actually there.
Alexander?
Yeah, +1 to the Backblaze recommendation. I've been using them for years. They're inexpensive, and even their business plans are very reasonable. I like that I can send a hard drive if I need to, instead of uploading it to the cloud for that initial backup. The other thing, too, is I would recommend if you're going to get it, and it wasn't immediately obvious to me when I first signed up, but they don't keep your data forever. You need to pay extra for that. So I did pay extra for the lifetime backup. So it's they tack it onto your bill every month or every year, however you decide to pay for it. But that is what I recommend, because then they'll just keep the data forever in case for some reason you need to go back to some project you worked on 3 years ago. You'll be able to actually get it back.
And I'm just going to double down on something that Jonas touched on, especially if this is for a business, but even if it's for personal, have a disaster recovery plan that is tested. If it's for a business, have every different person in the business who is going to be affected by it. Everybody's going to sit in a room and take 1 day a year or 2 days a year and go through the whole thing of what happens if X, Y, and Z aren't there anymore. How do we get back? It seems crazy, but I know Alex likes to say Noah built the ark before the rain. Coming up on Office Hours, you've got live-only shows this weekend. Saturdays are live Q&A. And then Sundays are introspection. It's kind of a show where we'll chew on things a little bit more and talk philosophy, talk about the show. But remember, you've got to be in Makana to see those shows. So officehours.global/join if you're not in and you want to be a part of it. Next question.
Jeff Cohen in Miami Beach, Florida. JKL, PSA and question. I just discovered YouTube supports the NLE-style keyboard shortcuts JK&L. Only recently discovered Frame.io does too. Not that I'm bitter. Anything else hiding JKL support we've been needlessly clicking away at?
Jonas?
Just going to say, it's one of the things that Chris Fenwick told me since PlayOutB was created. He's like, where are my hotkeys? I really need my hotkeys. So the last version finally has at least K and L hotkeys in there.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, anybody who edits full-time, your salvation are keyboard shortcuts. In most of the NLEs, they adopted this old Avid standard of JKL. Even Final Cut, actually the original version of Final Cut didn't use JKL, and they immediately got the feedback and had to change that. But there's a whole suite of things around JKL. For example, if you hold K and then you tap L or J, you'll go 1 frame at a time. If you option that, you'll go 10 frames at a time. There's just a whole world of little cluster keyboard shortcuts that everybody kind of uses, and you just stop thinking about them after a year or so, and it increases your speed of being able to navigate around a timeline by a factor of probably 25. It's amazing to watch somebody who's a serious keyboard wizard operate incredibly quickly without ever reaching out to touch a mouse, because that's a delay that you don't want to deal with. So if you're going to do a lot of editing, I highly suggest you try to condition your brain to expect these keys. It'll make a vast difference in your life.
And Bill may have mentioned if a QuickTime player does JK&L, and even if you repeatedly hit the L, it'll start to go faster. If you repeatedly hit the J, it'll go backwards faster. It's so
1,
nice.
2, 4, 8 times. And so you learn just 3 taps, and then you're going as fast as you want, and then you hit the space bar to stop, and then you tap L to go back into play. You just get used to this system and it's very much a touch typey kind of thing, and it's fabulous.
If you're making a software tool for creative people, the faster you can get the basics of that program into the lower brain muscle memory, the better the creative people are to think. Just obscure the interface and make it so that it just happens. And it's when the tool gets out of the way, it's just amazing. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, the NFL told the New England Patriots to shut down their Bluesky account. Is this institutional inertia or actively suppressing the platform?
David?
I don't believe so, but and I can't speak for the NFL, but enterprise in general, slow to adopt new technologies, and corporate communications are probably the most restrictive across the board when it comes to enterprise. So I think it's more that than anything else.
Alex?
They have business agreements with Meta and X. So, I mean, the NFL more than anyone else, I mean, they make money. And so you are now building a following on something that isn't generating revenue for the overall organization. They're going to tell you to stop doing it because, you don't wear that T-shirt because they're not paying for it. So that's, I mean, the NFL is pretty tight about what you can and can't do as a team, because all those teams benefit from that. They get big checks that make all of this work. So they don't. It's just a leak. I don't think it has anything to do with. They don't think they care about Bluesky. They just don't want to screw up what are probably very many 8-9 figure deals with X and Meta.
It's also a little bit of a business. Hey, I'm going to make some noise by making the Patriots Bluesky account go away, and if Bluesky gets upset about it, they can write us a check.
Yes. Well, I think the question is what is the exclusivity that's all set up within the agreements with Meta and X? But it does appear that they have agreements with Meta and X, and that's pretty much par for the course. If you're working in an organization that's taking on sponsorships, you don't step outside of the sponsorships.
Next question.
Chris Fontaine in Colombia. Do you know of any reasonably priced HDMI audio embedders that take in balanced analog and or AES-3 audio?
David?
Reasonably priced? No. Aja has a few of their mini lines. Barco Image Pros work wonders, but reasonably priced, not so much.
Do the Barcos embed audio?
There are a few that you... Is it embed?
Because the Image Pros we always knew as no audio, but any video that you can possibly imagine.
There are a few that'll do audio AES. Maybe it's AES out and not in.
You can get Barcos now for hundreds of dollars.
I got a few under my desk somewhere.
Yeah, I mean these Folsoms. They used to be Folsom. Barco bought them, and they were these Folsom Image Pros. And I had probably 6 or 8 of them, but we paid, I don't remember, $4,000 or $2,000 for each one of them. But what they did is they SDI, HDMI, DVI, VGA, whatever you plug into them, you could just map them to the other output and scale them.
Everything. Yeah.
Yeah. They had total control over the images, and they were magic. Like every time you showed up at an event anytime you showed up with an Image Pro, people knew that you were a pro.
Yeah. And they keep a cold control room kind of warm too. After you have enough of them.
But it was when we did Hangouts, we had to use them because the Hangout would run the address across the top. And if you didn't scale up just a little bit, everybody watching the broadcast could see it, and that was not good. This is before Hangouts had their own live feature. We would capture the frame and put it on the.
But like I said, the Aja, the little mini converter Aja has a AES and balanced. I think it's AES in, so you can get it onto an SDI feed, not into HDMI, to the best of my knowledge.
That's the hard part. So what you have to do, typically what you have to do is use AJA and Blackmagic have audio embedders. The Blackmagic audio embedders are limited to 4 channels, I believe, and so it depends on how much you need. The AJA one, I have a 12G around here somewhere that is 12G, and it will embed up to 8 channels onto the SDI feed via AES. Then you take it to an HDMI. The thing you got to watch for with HDMI when you're embedding into the SDI is that in some devices, Blackmagic is swapping the channels 3 and 4, and you got to be careful when as soon as you go to HDMI, they're doing something with the channels 3 and 4. You got to be careful.
If you're enjoying Office Hours, there are a couple ways you can help. You can like and subscribe to the channel, of course, but also we're nonprofit, so you can donate if you go to officehours.global/donate. We'd appreciate that. And there's also volunteer opportunities. You can sign up at officehours.global/volunteer. Next question.
Tucker Dragu in Oklahoma City. Jonas, can you give us the elevator pitch on WatchBee? What is it and why should we care?
Jonas?
So WatchBee is a lightweight tool that automatically manages Vmix playlists. In the past, one of our gripes was you have a folder, maybe a Dropbox sync or something that your client drops last-minute files in. And to get those into Vmix, you then need to go there, you drag and drop them, then the client changes the name, and suddenly your player doesn't work anymore. So I built this tiny tool that you can download for free. I'll put a link in the chat. It's open source, so anybody can modify it, and all it does is it watches a folder, and if a file gets added, it adds it to Vmix, and then if it's deleted, it deletes it again, so it keeps it in sync.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's asking, when you're connecting two Dante devices and audio can only flow from the first device to the second, and not vice versa, despite green check marks in Dante Controller, what should you check first?
Jonas? Can't hear you, Jonas.
I would check the network and how many audio flows you have remaining.
Next question.
Jonathan Daigle in Washington, D.C. I've unfortunately had to start using a Windows 11 PC ThinkPad again, but I cannot figure out how to get T-finger click, right alt click, to work reliably. If I click quickly, the menu appears, but my habit is to click and hold a la Mac OS. Is there any way?
I believe that the control click should still work, although I have gone into the trackpad settings and made sure that there is not, sometimes Windows does this thing where they'll say, okay, the bottom right corner of the trackpad is where you're going to right click and not a two-finger click trackpad. So I would go into the control panel or whatever they call it in Windows now, look for the trackpad settings, and then make sure that you've got that two-finger click that enabled and that there's not something else on the trackpad that's maybe causing interference and making the contextual menu not showing up. Next question.
Pedro G. Gonzalez III in Washington, D.C., looking at upgrading from a Logitech MX Mechanical Keyboard to a Nuphy Mechanical Keyboard. Anyone have a good experience with these keyboards?
A Nuphy, David?
Not with the Nuphy. I have a Keychron here that I use. I have an old IBM M-series mechanical that I use for rage typing. And then I also dug up the old Newton keyboard, which is also sort of mechanical. I love mechanical keyboards. They're great, but I might look into this because my W went out on the Keychron.
Jason?
Yeah, I feel like I've owned every keyboard there is under the sun. And yeah, Nuphy's, some are great, some are bad. Some people love them, some people hate them. The real difference for me for the Nuphy is like the amount of control you have with switches. Like if you change out the mechanical switches, it's kind of hard to hate the keyboards. I think they're great. And I got keycaps that shine the letter through and they're ginormous. It's actually kind of nice to use.
And big old softball to Mr. Lindsay.
96 is the one that I have here. This is the 96 V2. I have a 75 that I put in my bag if I need a keyboard that's on the, and it comes with a little thing that wraps around it. So it's kind of like a little hard case that I can throw it in, which is really nice. I got introduced to these by an EVS operator actually. And I looked at hers and I was like, oh, what is that? And a new keyboard. I will say, I thought I would never be this person. I just was like, I'm not going to go down this path. But I like the red keycaps better than the Moss one. So this one's a Moss, and the red ones are just a little softer than the Moss. And the mechanisms are just a little softer, which I find very luxurious. I find the red switches, not the keycaps, but the red switches are just a little softer, and they just feel very luxurious when you're typing. So I would recommend right now. I haven't tried all of the mechanisms, but I have a Moss one and I have a red one. And I unfortunately feel like I need to go and replace all my keys with the red ones, but I'm not going to do it yet. I might even just buy one of all of them and then or 3 or 4 of all of them and put them in there and try to figure out which ones I like the best. I just was really trying to resist becoming a keyboard mechanism person. Like I was like, that's a rabbit hole that's going to suck up a lot of my time and money. And I fell in.
I think it's either Nuphy or Keychron. One of them sells a little. It's not very expensive, but they sell a little keypad that has all of the different switches on it. But Yeah, you got to really
but
feel it.
I very much enjoy them. Like and it has wireless. It comes with like a little transmitter, so it has wireless. You can do USB-C straight into your computer. That's one of the main requirements that I had, is that it had to have a USB-C connection into it without it being hard wired. So I can pull out the wire to the keyboard, and it's USB-C, not USB-A, and I was able to plug it into whatever I want. And it had to have a wireless transmitter so that I can, because what I do is I have it connected to my my KVM, and then when Michael Krasny comes in to do his show, I go over there, but my keyboard still works over here, and I don't have to have it all wired up. So anyway.
Bill?
David Brady, if there was a show called Rage Typing Championships, I would watch the heck out of that. Just saying.
The noise.
I can see the whole season right out in front of
Cut in Bruce Almighty.
I'm pretty sure there are YouTube channels of the AMSR for clickety-click keyboards. And Alex, for my Keychron at work, I have a 90-degree braided USB-C cable. So
I have a 90-degree braided one as well. Like this is braided and 90 degrees. It's
what I want to hear is like the Keychron, like with in the middle of a cathedral. Like how loud can you make?
And
it?
I came to this one from a DOS keyboard, which is another one but it was so clickety clack that I gave it to my daughter. Loved it, so I let her have the DOS keyboard.
I'm
which is
so
actually more
there for that
expensive than
show.
Nuphy.
Yeah. The DOSes will come with I think for a while they just came with blue switches. Yeah. And they're so loud I can't
really
use them
loud.
anywhere.
But you feel like you're working
but
hard.
You feel it's like
I couldn't find that. The IBM keyboard that I have is somewhere in the vast coffers here. That thing is the beast. You put it in the dishwasher to clean it. It's beautiful.
This week in switches. Next question.
Okan Fours in Stockholm, Sweden. What features in Vmix 28 are you looking forward to? For me, it is the Web Telestrator monitor and the new shortcut to change Stinger for replay, set Stinger GT input 1 to 4.
Jonas?
There's a couple fixes that we're looking forward to. If resizable bar is enabled, it finally shows the GPU memory correctly. There's new triggers. The Telestrator is really nice. They fixed a lot of they fixed some issues with SRT. It's a pretty good update.
Next question.
Roz Humphreys in Comox, BC. Any drone enthusiasts? Any way to feed a video from DJI goggles to more than one screen? Wishful thinking.
Jason?
Not wishful thinking, but there is a big fat depends here. So that there are, as far as I know, 3 different things that are the DJI goggles. There are the goggles, there are the FPV goggles, and then there are the Goggles V2. Goggles V2 can be connected via USB-C to it's the Crystal Sky controller. It's something along those lines. And that has an HDMI out. So you can actually daisy chain it out and get HDMI from there, and that out will work. The other, and age-old way to do this is to just use screen mirroring with your iOS device. You can mirror, unless you have a really old iOS device, you can just screen mirror, and you're going to have some latency, but you can absolutely get it out from the heads-up display that can be configured to basically just give you raw video. So I put a direct link in the chat, and that'll give you the whole flow chart.
Thank you, everyone, so much. Thank you for all the questions. We had such a great round today. We did have a couple left over. So if we didn't get your question today, we'll get the QR codes in automatically. If it is a Meccana question, it'll be sent back to your notes so you can ask the next time you're watching. Panelists, thank you so much. This is so fun. I just every Friday, like a little bit more of my brain opens up, and it's like, oh, I never even thought. It's amazing, and you're all just giving your time freely, and we appreciate it. And also, thank you to our back end crew all around the world, getting up early, staying up late, keeping us organized, making everyone look and sound good, making the show run. It's fantastic. If we had to go and ask all these questions in person today, the Tlaloc traversal would have been 36,000 miles. That's 58,000 kilometers, 287 million bananas for scale. All right, we'll see you in after hours.
+1 on Bruce Almighty. That is one of my favorite gifts.
It's not really mechanical, but
Rage Typing YouTube channel needs to be there.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Wait
you've got your
1
6
moment.
hours of relaxing music. I've got my 6 hours of rage typing.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm wondering though, the Newton. I don't think it's ADB. It's like that Newton DIN serial thing. I'm wondering if there's a USB connector, because this is actually the keyboard they used, I think, in the Matrix. There was one.
I have one that's in my. I have a keyboard in my Scorpio bag that's this big.
Yeah.
It's like a little thumb one. It's like I was this audio. It's smaller than that. That's huge compared to the one that I have. It's like massive. That's like practically a truck compared to my little car. Like it's this tiny. I don't think it's in range.
But man, the IBM keyboard is the best. Oh yeah, there you go. Similar, Courtney. Yeah.
Look at you guys.
Somebody could probably write a program that if the sound of your keyboard gets above like 109 dB, your camera turns on, particularly the camera that shoots down on your keyboard on Macs, and just sends that file to